Hey everyone, before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more exciting content. The desert sun was bleeding orange across the flight line at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma when Lance Corporal Riley Rattler Kane stepped out of the armory carrying a crate of M27 rifles like it weighed nothing. Her sleeves were rolled high because it was 118 degrees and regulations be damned when you're dying of heat stroke. That's when they saw it. A thick black snake tattoo that started at her wrist, coiled 3 times around her forearm, and disappeared under the cuff of her blouse. The head of the snake sat right on the back of her hand, fangs out, ready to strike. From the back of the hangar came the first chuckle, then another, then a full-blown chorus. Yo, check it out. New girl's got some mall rat ink. What is that, Hot Topic Marines? Bet she got that after 3 tequila shots in Jacksonville. Riley kept walking, boots echoing on the concrete, jaw tight. She had heard it all before, from Lejeune to Pendleton to 29 Palms. The laughter followed her like a bad smell. Sergeant Major Vasquez, a man built like a refrigerator with legs, barked for the company to fall in for morning formation. Riley dropped the crate, took her place in the second rank, and stared straight ahead. First Sergeant Holliday started reading the plan of the day when the laughter started again, low and ugly, from the back row. A brand new private, fresh from the School of Infantry and full of himself, whispered loud enough for half the formation to hear. Standards must be dropping if they're letting people with tramp stamps wear the eagle, globe, and anchor. That was the moment Colonel Marcus Reaper Hawthorne stepped out of his office on the mezzanine overlooking the hangar. The man didn't walk so much as prowl. Silver oak leaves glinted on his collar, and the only sound louder than his boots was the silence that fell when 220 Marines realized the old man had heard everything. Colonel Hawthorne was a legend. 3 combat tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, a Silver Star with a V that nobody in the battalion was authorized to talk about, and a reputation for chewing up lieutenants and spitting out privates. He stopped at the edge of the railing, looked down at the formation like a hawk eyeing a field mouse, and spoke in that low, calm voice that somehow carried to the far corners of the hangar.
Lance Corporal Kane.
Front and center. Every head turned. Riley double-timed it, stopped 2 paces in front of the colonel's perch, and snapped to parade rest. The private who'd made the tramp stamp comment suddenly looked like he was trying to swallow his own tongue. Hawthorne stared at her for a long 5 seconds. Roll your sleeve higher, Marine. Riley didn't hesitate. She pushed the blouse all the way to her shoulder. The snake kept going, thick as a garden hose, scales perfectly rendered, until the tail disappeared under the edge of her skivvy shirt on her deltoid. The hangar was dead quiet. Then the colonel did something nobody had ever seen him do in 15 years. He unbuttoned his own cami blouse, shrugged it off, and handed it to his adjutant standing behind him. Underneath he wore the standard brown t-shirt, but the sleeves were cut off high, and wrapped around his right arm from wrist to shoulder was the exact same snake. Same artist, same style, same fangs on the back of the hand. Only his was faded from years in the sun. The black now a deep charcoal, scars crossing the scales like someone had tried to erase it with a knife and failed. A collective inhale sucked half the air out of the building. Hawthorne spoke again, softer this time, but every word hit like a hammer. This tattoo was done in a village outside Sanjin, Helmand Province, 2011. The man who put it on me was a Hazara ink master who'd been marking Mujahideen fighters since the Soviet days. He only gave the snake to people he believed would come back alive. I was 26. Dumb. Thought I was immortal. He told me the snake eats its own tail when the man who wears it dies. Mine's still hungry. He turned his arm so the formation could see the tail of the snake ended in an Ouroboros knot right at the top of his shoulder. Then he looked straight at the private in the back row who was now the color of printer paper. Private dipshit, what's your name? P. Private Miller, sir. Miller. You ever been shot at? No, sir. Ever seen a 19-year-old kid you carried on a litter for 6 kilometers take his last breath while calling for his mom? No, sir. Ever had to decide which of your Marines' lives, and which one dies because there's only room for one on the bird? Miller's voice cracked. No, sir. Then shut your mouth about things you know nothing about. The colonel pulled his blouse back on, buttoned it slow, never taking his eyes off the formation. Lance Corporal Kane earned her snake the same place I earned mine. Different village, different year, but same war. Same blood. Same promise that she'll come back to finish what she started. Any Marine in this hangar who has a problem with that can meet me on the grinder after formation. We'll discuss it like men. Not a single boot moved. Riley stood frozen, eyes forward, but a single tear tracked down her cheek and dripped off her jaw onto the concrete. Hawthorne saw it. He gave the slightest nod, the kind only another snake wearer would recognize. "Fall out and get to work," he said. The formation broke like someone had pulled the plug. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked at Riley the same way again. But that was only the beginning. 3 weeks later, the battalion got the warning order. A Marine Special Operations team had gone missing near the Syrian border, and MAG-13 was tasked with the combat search and rescue. The problem? The last known position was inside a Russian air defense bubble. Nobody had ever flown fixed-wing extraction that deep into contested airspace and lived. Colonel Hawthorne handpicked the aircrew. When the list went up on the board, Riley's name was on it as the only crew chief for the 2 Ospreys going in. Half the squadron thought he'd lost his mind putting a Lance Corporal with 8 months in the unit on the most dangerous mission of the decade. The other half remembered the snake and kept their mouths shut. The night before the launch, Riley sat alone in the hangar polishing the twin M240S mounted in the ramp of Viper 20. Hawthorne walked in, boots echoing again. He carried 2 canteens of coffee and set one beside her. "Thought you might need this." "Thank you, sir." He sat on an ammo crate, something colonels simply did not do, and stared at the Osprey's tail rotor. "You scared?" "Terrified, sir." "Good. Only idiots aren't scared. The snake doesn't keep you alive. It just reminds you why you can't quit." Riley looked at him. "Permission to speak freely?" "Always." "Why me, sir?" "You could have picked any crew chief in the squadron. Half the staff sergeants have triple my time." Hawthorne took a long drink of coffee. "Because when I looked at your service record, I saw a kid who grew up in foster homes, enlisted at 17 with a waiver, finished top of her class in MATSG Pensacola, and still found time to pull 2 Afghani interpreters out of a burning MRAP in 2021 during the Kabul evacuation. You were a contractor then, civilian, no body armor, no weapon, and you still went back in. The snake chose you before you even knew what it was." Riley's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't think anyone knew about Kabul. I know everything about the people I send into harm's way." He stood up, put a hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow we go get our brothers. You keep that ramp down and those guns hot. I'll keep the bird in the air. Deal?" "Deal, sir." The mission launched at 0200. 2 MV-22s, callsigns Viper 20 and 21, slipped across the border at 200 feet. Lights out, radar spoofers screaming. Russian S-400s lit up the sky looking for them, but the pilots flew canyons like they were born in them. 43 minutes later, they found the crash site. A smoking Black Hawk surrounded by ISIS fighters using it for target practice. Riley was first down the ramp before the wheels even touched sand. She laid down fire with the port M240 while the starboard gunner did the same. Tracers stitched the night red. She saw movement in the wreckage. 3 Marines still alive, one dragging a wounded pilot by his vest. She ran forward under fire, grabbed the pilot, threw him over her shoulder like he weighed nothing, and sprinted back to the bird while bullets snapped past her head. That's when the RPG hit. The blast took out the starboard engine of Viper 20. The Osprey lurched sideways, rotor blades chewing dirt. Colonel Hawthorne fought the controls, screaming over the intercom, "We are not leaving anyone." Riley grabbed the wounded pilot, dragged him up the ramp, then turned back for the others. The second Osprey was already full and pulling pitch to get out of the kill zone. There was only one bird left, and it was dying. Hawthorne made the call no commander ever wants to make. He put Viper 20 down hard between the survivors and the enemy, using the fuselage as a shield. "Everybody in. Now!" Riley stood in the ramp, guns empty, brass casing rolling around her boots, and waved the last 2 Marines aboard. An ISIS fighter rose up 20 meters away with another RPG. She saw him, knew she had maybe half a second. She reached for the grenade pouch on her vest, pulled the pin, cooked it for 2 beats, and threw it like a baseball All-American. The grenade landed directly in the fighter's lap. He had just enough time to look down before he disappeared in a pink mist. Viper 20 lifted off on 1 engine. Alarms screaming, oil pressure dropping to 0. Hawthorne flew it anyway, nursing the dying bird across the border while Riley knelt between the wounded, pressing chest seals and whispering, "Stay with me, stay with me." They crash-landed at a forward operating base in Jordan 23 minutes later. The Osprey rolled on its side and burned, but every soul aboard walked or was carried out alive. Back at Yuma 2 weeks later, the entire battalion turned out for the award ceremony on the parade deck. The commandant himself flew in. Riley stood at attention in dress blues, the new scar on her cheek still pink, while they read the citation for the Navy Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. But the real moment came after. Colonel Hawthorne, now wearing the single star of a Brigadier General Select, walked up to her holding something in his hand. He stopped in front of her, came to attention, and saluted, something a general never does to a lance corporal. Then he opened his hand. In it was a brand new ink pen, the same kind the old Hazara artist had used 15 years earlier. "I talked to the old man last month," Hawthorne said. "He's still alive. Barely. Told him about a girl with fire in her heart who kept her promise. He said the snake needed 1 more scale." Riley looked down at her arm. Where the tail of the snake had ended in an unfinished coil, there was now a fresh black scale, still raw and shining. Hawthorne smiled for the first time anyone could remember. "Welcome to the family, Rattler." The battalion erupted. Marines who once laughed now cheered until their voices gave out. And somewhere in the crowd, Private Miller, who had spent the last 2 weeks on permanent litter duty and extra duty until he couldn't see straight, stood a little taller. He looked at the snake on Riley's arm, then at the matching one on the new general's, and for the first time understood what it actually meant to be a Marine. The snake had eaten another lie that day, and it was still hungry. That's the story of Lance Corporal Riley Kane and the day an entire battalion learned never to judge a book by its ink. Drop a comment and tell me what part of this great country you're watching from, East Coast, West Coast, down south, up north, or somewhere in the heartland. I read every single one. And if this story hit you in the feels, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear that real heroes don't always look the way you expect.
Semper Fi.